Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL Podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly.
Well, welcome back to the DCL Podcast, your podcast to help you cruise a little smarter. And I am not Lake. And also, I don't have other co-hosts. I have to fly solo, but I have the most amazing guests, and I'm so excited to welcome my very good friends to the show. First, a repeat guest, Sarah from Gluten-Free, Dairy-Free Walt Disney World. How are you this morning?
I'm great. I'm excited to be back and talk about all things Disney Cruise.
I wonder how many, in the middle of the night when I wasn't sleeping, I was like, I wonder how many times Sarah has been on. This has got to be your third, fourth?
I feel like third or fourth. We should have fact checked ourselves.
I know. People can Google it if they want. They could go to DCLpodcast.com and do a search now because Lake made it so we can search. So if you ever want to find the previous Special Diets episodes, go to DCLpodcast.com and there's a search bar and you can check. But joining us also is Gina, first time caller from Gluten-Free Disney World. Hi, Gina. How are you today?
Hi, I'm great. I feel like, is this where you say long-time listener, first-time caller, one of those?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I was going for there. Okay, so this episode is going to be about Disney Cruise Line with special diets. So we're still going to talk about the things and the meals that we love on Disney Cruise Line, but we're also going to actually discuss how we order, what the process is, the whole special diet realm, because there just keeps being questions for people about how to do it. And we also hear in the different Facebook groups time and time again of just not like people not getting what they want on the ship. And I just want people to have a really good dining experience. And Gina, your first cruise dining experience was a little sketchy. Let's talk about it and advocate and teach people. And you can talk about your newest way that you handle your special diets on DCL. Let's get into it. Let's talk about our Disney cruise background. Sarah, you start.
Okay, well, I started cruising on DCL in 2014. I went on a cruise with my mom, and at the time, fully gluten-free and dairy-free. I have celiac disease. I also now limit my dairy, so I can have dairy in my diet now. And then didn't cruise again until 2018. I started cruising in 2018 with my significant other, Brandon, and we got the DCL cruise bug. So we have now sailed, we just finished our 12th DCL sailing. We were on the Fantasy, which might be our favorite ship. Still debating Christy, but
Team
it's
Fantasy.
totally grown on us. And yeah, looking forward to some more. We're well on our way to Pearl. And I'll quickly mention Brandon does have a lot of food allergies. So in addition to me having celiac and limiting dairy, Brandon is also allergic to fish and shellfish, peanuts and tree nuts, and then has some rare allergies to chicken, turkey, and all vegetables in the cabbage family, which adds a lot of extra fun and excitement to our travels. But thankfully, DCL is so amazing and we've had really good experiences. So definitely can share some tips today on how we navigate that with a lot of common allergens, but also some unique ones too.
Yeah, that really is a testament to Disney because both Disney Cruise Line and Walt Disney World, you guys eat out. We're all local to the parks, and that's where we all dine on the regular. And I love that even with Brandon's multitude of allergies, he is able to still enjoy amazing meals, usually with a beautiful dish of potatoes that go with it. So, yeah.
So many potatoes. Thankfully, he is not allergic to potatoes.
Could you
Otherwise, it
imagine?
would
Oh my
be
God.
the worst. But I think one of the great things that we can highlight today, too, is that DCL is such a great buffer, especially if you do have a lot of special dietary needs when you're traveling all over the world. We've been to Alaska and Europe on DCL, and that has been really great for us because it was a safe space that if we couldn't find food in port that we felt comfortable with, we could always go back to the ship, and we knew that we would have good options in every potato.
Yeah, that actually is a really good point that it's like your starting off point and then you can go out and explore, bring a bar if you need to, and make it back to the ship to eat another meal when it's time to do that. And then just for listeners that may not know, I have been on maybe 27 Disney cruises and I was diagnosed as with celiac disease just over 10 years ago. And so all but one or two of those cruises were as a person that has to eat gluten-free. So I have vast experience doing it, and I absolutely love DCL. Gina, what about yourself?
Well, my cruising experiences has been much more limited than the two of yours. I feel like the newbie on the scene over here, but we first started cruising on the Fantasy. That was in September, I think, of 2023 is when my mother-in-law actually talked us into going on a cruise. And being an entire family who had never been on a cruise at all, we thought, why not jump into a 7-night and just see what happens? So we'll talk about some of those stories in a little bit, but I kind of caught the bug after that too. Just like Sarah was saying, it was the first cruise. It was 7 nights. My partner was convinced that he was going to be sick the whole time, ended up not being, and we promptly booked the placeholder on that cruise. Fast forward to, let's see, July of 2024. We got a call from a travel agent and said, hey, there's some really good specials going on right now, and then popped on the Wish real quick. So I've had those 2 cruises under my belt and getting ready to set sail on the Treasure in a little over a month.
Yay.
Yeah.
Was he worried that he was going to get sick from like norovirus or from motion sickness?
No, from motion sickness. He had had this
Okay.
experience. It was one of those things like this one time when I was 18, I was on a boat and I got seasick. And so that's it. And I can never sail again. And so, just back to the brim with all of the seasickness pills that you could imagine, and ended up taking none of them and just kind of figuring it out while we were on there. But it worked out. I know it doesn't work out like that for everybody, but we were really thankful that whatever happened at 18 was not happening at 45.
Yeah, I would never compare like a private boat that you've taken on either a lake or the ocean or a bay to a cruise, because it's a totally different experience. And I know even I get sick on little boats and tenders and things like that. Just take a little less drowsy Dramamine. And for me, that has worked for my cruises.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into it. Gina, I know besides you having celiac disease as well, you also order.
Yes. Right. Yes. Thank you for that. I just realized I was like, oh, I forgot to mention what the special diet situation is over in this household. So I have celiac, so I eat gluten-free, obviously. I have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old. My 5-year-old has never had dairy ever. Just even in pregnancy, we didn't have dairy. Anyways, that would be a different story for a different podcast and a different day. We order dairy-free for her. We also order gluten-free for her as well because she's 5 and she eats minuscule amounts of food in general. So I don't want to order big meals for her that are non-gluten-free and then I can't eat the leftovers, which is what I normally end up doing. So we just do hers gluten-free and dairy-free. And she doesn't eat meat. Just she doesn't want to eat animals and she doesn't like that kind of thing. So we eat that way for her. And then my partner and my son, my 8-year-old, they are both of the special breed where they can eat whatever they want to. So they do most of the time, with the exception of there are times where if we're out, or if I really want to try something, then, we'll order everybody's to be gluten-free. Or if it's a particular situation where it feels like, oh, there's going to be a lot of things on the table and this could be a risky situation, then the two of them just go, you know what, just make ours gluten-free too, because that'll be easier. So we kind of do a little hodgepodge of everything, but the really important ones are me and my daughter.
Which is probably true in life anyway. Yeah. So we also in my household, only I eat gluten-free, but my husband will order a gluten-free dish, or my son as well, if I want to be able to eat off their plates. So we'll do that occasionally if we want to have table food or things like that. Okay, so we've booked our cruise, whatever your cruise is. What is the next step if you have a special diet on DCL?
Well, for me, it's letting either my travel agent, who I will typically use, including Christy, and let them know, hey, we have a special diet, and have them get a hold of DCL. Or if you book directly yourself, making sure you let DCL know, hey, we have a special diet. And the process is so much better than it used to be. Like back in the day, they had forms and like things you could do on their website. Now it's easy. You can let your agent know, or you can let DCL know, hey, these are our special diets. And for us, we have different ones, like all of you were saying, and we can have different things. So Brandon can have gluten. I can have things that Brandon's allergic to. So we make sure, like if I get a hold of Christy, I'm going to say, hey, Sarah, no gluten. Brandon, here are his. And then we make sure that that's flagged on a reservation.
And then from my standpoint as the travel agent, depending on what it is, like there are some things you can check a box for, certain tree nuts or peanut allergies, gluten, dairy, and it's like in the depths of the website because there's one that's just like maybe dairy intolerant. And that is on the first page. But then for gluten, which I don't understand why it's there, it's on a second page. Like you have to click through and you can get that. Or like in Brandon's case, we have to call because there are no boxes for all vegetables in the cabbage family. So it's super easy. They make a note. And I would recommend, like, look, if you're gluten-free and you roll up on the ship and forget to tell them or didn't know, they have so many options that it's not going to be an issue. But if you have very specific and a multitude of dietary restrictions, then definitely let them know in advance because they may have to procure some different items in order to feed you for the week. So just keep that in mind and let your travel agent know. They don't need a lot of time because I don't think they're looking at it very far in advance, but they will look at it in advance. Your servers 9 times out of 10 will be notified. I would say most of the time my server would come up and say, okay, we understand there's an allergy here. Or they'll just ask you also, do you have an allergy when you sit down? And then they'll be able to process that throughout. All right. So then once you are on board, Gina, like, did you do sit down lunch for your first lunch or did you go to the buffet?
Yeah. So that was what threw me off at first. And I think that I had felt very well prepared going into it. Of course, I'm very good friends with both of you. And then I follow, everybody else who's going on cruises on social media and all of that, watched all the YouTube. So I felt like I had this very good idea and list of things that I could and couldn't have and what I was looking forward to. And then when we very first boarded, I was set on, okay, go and sit down. I think it was animation palette. Am I getting that wrong?
Yeah. No, now I'm only thinking of art of animation.
Right.
Animator's palette.
Animator's palette. Thank you. So that was where they had the sit down lunch. And of course, it was our very first sailing. So we didn't get a port arrival time that was super early because we couldn't, check into our cruise until late. And so when we got on and walked up there, they said, oh, we're full. So you can't, there's no more room here, which of course my heart started beating a million miles a minute. I'm sweating. I'm going like, what do I do now? How do I eat? And she said, your only option is to go to the buffet. And I was like, this is not how I wanted to start. So ideally, I wanted to start with the sit down, like you were saying, but that is not what ended up happening.
Oh my God, your first cruise, because you had a hurricane too.
We did. We didn't know though. Christy, we did not know that there was a hurricane because it was off like, far away, whatever we were worried about. What our excursions were going to be and like, does my outfit match your outfit because we want to have cute pictures. So like those were the things that we were focused on. And yes, it was moments before the sail away party, literal moments, because everybody was out there for it, where the captain came on and said, just kidding. We're not going to go to where you think we're going. We're going to go to another part of the world that you haven't heard of. And I'm sure it'll be fine. Anyways, everybody, cheers. So happy you're here. So
yeah, you were
much more eloquently than that.
You were originally booked on the Eastern or the Western?
The Western. Yeah,
okay.
Doing like the Cozumel, Jamaica, Grand Cayman. And so it got switched to Eastern, which was
Tortola, St. Thomas, and Castaway Cay.
Yes. And we're looking at those and looking at each other going, what's Tortola? Where is that? I don't even know what that is. Yeah. So everything kind of got thrown for a loop. But so maybe what I'll say is going to the buffet, what I had remembered from doing research prior to, which I highly recommend if you have any type of special diets. I mean, please, there is a whole like wing it mentality of people that I can appreciate and still not fully understand. I am not one of those. And if you have special diets, I feel like just do a lot of research going into it because it's better to have a solid footing on things, in my personal opinion. But so
nobody researched like you. Like you're texting me, we need the menu. Then one of our other friends was on the Treasure last week. And you're like, but I have to have the menus so I can review them. And then I'm like, but Gina, don't worry. I will get you the menus next week when I cruise, or in 2 weeks when I cruise on the Treasure, because I only got half of the menus on the preview. And you're like, no, I need them all now.
Well, I'm trying to alleviate some of the pressure on you, because when you're on the cruise, I set an alarm for 5:30 p.m. every day. I can text you and say, need the menu.
I need that in my life because sometimes I'll forget. And so, yes, you'll just have to keep texting because apparently that's what we're going to do. And then let me say really quick, And I think, Sarah, you were the first one to experience before the shutdown the allergy menus on DCL that was on like the Dream, I believe, that is no longer on the Dream. But will you discuss what an allergy menu on Disney Cruise Line is?
Yeah, I first of all really wish they would bring those back on all of the fleet and the Dream.
Mhm.
They have the ones on the Dream already done. Just bring them back. It would be so great. So I guess that's one thing to know about is that some Disney Cruise Line ships have an allergy menu. If you're used to going to Disney World and you're used to those allergy menus that you get at any of the table service and quick service dining, they're very similar. So they're completely tailored to the top 9 common allergens. And so it makes it great because you can say, hey, I want X, Y, or Z, and I already know it's going to be safe. It's easy for the kitchen. It's easy for you as the customer, as the guest. And it's just nice because it gives a lot of variety. I think you both would probably agree. Those allergy menus on the DCL fleet are great because you're like, I can have gluten free pot stickers. I can have gluten free gnocchi. I already know right away that I have 3 different desserts I can get instead of having to kind of navigate that with your server. So some of the other ships do not have those allergy menus, which means you have to kind of take a look at the regular menu, which will have a select number of gluten-free, dairy-free, and vegetarian notations on them, but it's not comprehensive. There's a lot of things that can be made easily gluten-free or actually already gluten-free, but just weren't marked as such on the menu. So it's a little bit more work. So your mileage is going to vary. The new ships, the Wish and the Treasure, are the 2 current ships that have the allergy menus, except for if you are going to Castaway Key or Lookout Key at Lighthouse Point, those islands both have an allergy menu as well. So if you're on the Disney Dream, for instance, you'll probably get an allergy menu if you're going to Castaway Key. So it's a little hit or miss, but like Gina said, doing your research, knowing ahead of time. Christy has a bunch of those on her website. I have them on some of our website for the ones we've gotten. So definitely reach out to people because you can find them in advance and take a look, which is super helpful.
Yeah. And make sure if you have a special diet that includes dairy or gluten, that you look at both menus because there are items like the almond cake at 1923 and then the Fantasy and the Dream have this dessert now as well that is marked gluten-free on the regular menu, but it is not on the allergy menu because it contains dairy and nuts and some other items, I'm assuming. You want to make sure that you look at both menus if just gluten or just dairy is a restriction because you will have more choices. And who doesn't love more choices?
I also wanted to add on that too, because I thought this was a really exciting part of being having food allergies, which we don't really get the exciting part normally. So it's definitely worth noting that if you're on those ships that have both menus, the regular menu that has the notations for gluten and dairy, and then also the allergy menu, there are so many more options for you than there are actually for people who are eating without food allergies. So there were several items that I was able to order and get. And when it came out to the table, people in my party were going, I'm sorry, what's that? That looks great. What is that? Why do you have that? And I just would say, obviously, because I'm very special. And so you cannot have any of this because it's all for me. Right. But you get much more expansive variety of things. So that I think is a real plus for us that we should take the win.
Yeah, I'm looking at you, Marvel pot stickers and 1923 gnocchi. And then there's a couple of other items that are just on our menus that aren't on the other. And the Treasure, ladies, I cannot wait for you to cruise the Treasure because some of the best desserts that I have had on Disney Cruise Line or in general are on the Treasure. Cocoa Dome Mousse something is one of them. You know how I'm really good with the names. There was one at, well, I don't know. You'll see it. Look in a couple of weeks. So if I've already cruised Martin Luther King week in January, I will post all of the yummy food on Instagram for sure and Facebook. And then I'll put my blog post up to show. But ladies, we have good desserts. It was like night after night of good desserts that are only on the allergy menu.
I love that. And I think the Wish also had some really good desserts as well, too. Like compared to some of the other ships, I was like, the lemon cake at Worlds of Marvel was one of my favorite desserts that I've ever had on DCL. And I just think that it's nice that they are thinking of more composed dishes rather than being like, this is the chef's allergy choice of the day, which sometimes isn't going to be my favorite. It's going to be a chocolate cake or a cookie brownie situation or a
Chocolate
mousse.
cake.
It's nice to see some creativity. So I agree with Gina. That is such a win with those allergy menus. They have some really good options on those.
And I want to pick my dessert. Thank you to the chef who's making me lovely food, but I don't need them to pick my dessert because mint ice cream is never a choice I'm going to make. And there's always a mint ice cream choice for a chef's choice during a cruise on the first 4 ships on Disney Cruise Line. I think we need to revert back really quick, Gina, to your buffet experience. So let's talk briefly. What is the process for ordering food at either the deck food on the pool deck or at the buffet on a Disney cruise?
Yeah. So the buffet one, when you walk in, what I like to do is what I would do at most any buffet that I go to at Disney is I sort of like walk the line real quick and sort of look at what they have. So I have a general idea of what I can and cannot have. I mean, you pretty much know that by now, right? Of looking at things. And then important to look for the person wearing the white shirt. Christy, you'll have to say the formal name. Is that the head?
The head server, head waiter.
Okay. So look for the head server. And then I just simply walk up and say the magical words of, I have a food allergy order. And they go and then bring out pads and come over and talk to you about what you want. I also am really careful to say, I have a food allergy and I cannot have anything off the line. Can you bring this from the back?
And that you can't handle cross-contamination because that's now a new, Disney is like, well, is it just like a preference? Is it okay if this is fried in the same oil? So just, I throw that in there as well now.
Yes. Yeah,
even when I say I have celiac disease, I still have to sometimes say, which is very frustrating, that no, I cannot have cross-contamination.
Yes. Yeah. And it goes a long way. I know that this maybe goes without saying, but it goes a long way to say those things very strongly, but also very kindly, right?
Yes.
Because they're helping you out, doing something nice. So I have seen people walk up and it's just like, I have this and you need to get me this, and just kind of, and I know the anxiety is high at that point. So it feels easy to get swept away with that, but just, you're going to be with them for however many nights. And so just kind of come at it from that point of view of like, I want us to have a really good relationship because I would like you to get me lunch again tomorrow.
And they'll
so
remember. Yeah. And they'll be the same people. And they'll be like, oh yeah, you're Christy from 7154.
That's right.
Okay. Gluten wheat. And I'm like, why? And I'll go on multiple cruises where there was a couple of times where I was in a few like closer in, and I would walk up to the same head waiter and they would say, oh yeah, gluten wheat. And I'm like, wow, you've now seen thousands of other people in between us, and be appreciative of the beautiful food that they are going to deliver you.
And they end up getting to know your taste too, right? Because there's been several times where all of a sudden it's night 3 or 4. And then several times I've been on 2 cruises, but you know what I mean? Where all of a sudden it's night 3 or 4 and they're going, oh, we just thought you would like this. And so the chef made this, or we just thought that this would be something that you would enjoy. And so that's really neat. It just kind of ups that whole Disney sparkle. So it really ended up being very easy, I think, to order from the buffet. You just have to know that your stuff is going to take a little longer. So, you put in that order, they ask you about where you're going to be sitting. So it's helpful to have a seat already picked out or have your family already there. We just kind of pointed over. I went and sat down and held the space while everybody else went up and got whatever it was that they were eating. And then I'd say maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes sometimes at the most. And then the food just appeared at the table and everything was wonderful. So it wasn't as difficult as I would have thought. It's similar when you're ordering on the pool deck. At that point, I just kind of went up because I didn't see anybody in a white shirt, just went up to anybody working and said, I have a food allergy order that I'd like to place. And they said, oh, just one moment and we'll get you somebody. And then similar process. Somebody came over, spoke to me about the allergies, took the order, talked about cross-contamination, and then that was that. Yeah.
And just in case any listener pipes in, we know celiac disease isn't a food allergy, but it is what the food industry understands. And so these are the words we use because we want them to understand. So just my little Christy disclaimer. Okay. So then dinner is a little bit different. You arrive your first night, and I would say 99 times out of 100, you cannot pre-order first night's meal. And so you will work with your server about what you're going to eat. And back when Sarah and I were first cruising gluten-free, everything had to be placed through the head waiter. But now, most of the time, everything is through your regular dining server. And then one other comment I'll make is it's very rare to talk to a chef on Disney Cruise Line because they're busy literally making the food for hundreds and hundreds of people. So there could be a rare occurrence that you need to talk to a chef. But in my 27 Disney cruises, I have talked to a chef maybe twice and maybe even once. And so I would just say, please, because it is more common for us that go to Walt Disney World to say, I'd like to talk to a chef. Just know that that isn't truly possible most of the time in the dining room on Disney Cruise Line. You can talk to a chef on the pool deck, but that's a different scenario.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because those people who are used to Disney World and being able to talk to a chef if they want to, it is going to be very different on a Disney Cruise Line ship. I think the only time we've ever talked to a chef has actually been at Palo and Remy, which are the adults only dining locations. And that was just for specific things. I think the one time it was during COVID, they were really slow. The chef's like, I'm gonna come out and talk to you about stuff. I'm going to make you some extra special things. And so that was not the usual process. I'll also really add to that you can do some pre-ordering your first night during that dining session, but it's not necessary. And we've only really done it on a few different times when we've had a specific request, like we want the gluten-free fried brie, or our last cruise on the Fantasy, our service team actually at lunch at main dining actually had us pre-order, which was super duper nice of them. And again, not necessarily common, but there's a couple different options if you have a specific request, but it's not really necessary the first night.
Sarah, you're reminding me too that one of the things that I like to keep in mind is that not only did I mark it on the reservation or have the travel agent mark it, however that was booked, but I then just kind of assume that nobody was told, which is not true, right? They pass that along and all that. But just for my own peace of mind, I like to go onto the ship knowing, hey, nobody was told about this and I'm going to have to remind everybody. And I feel like for my dining anxiety, that puts me in a better frame where I'm not then feeling so anxious and disappointed that that didn't go through. I'd rather have them say, oh, yes, 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 we, it's for this and this, and we were told, than to stare at me and say, allergy for what? No. So that's just kind of how I go into it. Yeah.
I think that's so smart. Yeah, I think that's so smart too. Everybody's got their own comfort zone and how they handle it. We're more laissez-faire now because we've been on DCL a lot, but I totally agree, Gina. Like if you want to double check, that's a really smart thing to do just to put yourself at ease. So you're not like, oh, this is a surprise no one wanted on the start of our cruise, right? You don't want to set it off on a bad foot. You want to set everybody up for success and have good food and good time. So yeah, you got to kind of do what works best for you to make sure you put yourself at ease so you're not feeling uncomfortable or nervous that you're not going to get options.
Yeah, their employees, their cast members are expanding at such a huge frequency that you may have a lot of new people. And so they might really appreciate like the reminder of just, yes, okay, thank you. We'll make sure that you get that stuff. And then it just helps it go smoother.
And because the employees may be newer, you may have to actually let them know what can be made gluten-free and then request that they ask. So if you did have a newer server, that could be something that you have to walk through with them. Sarah mentioned earlier that sometimes she's been able to get fried brie on the first night. And I would say I've almost never been able to get fried brie on the first night. And this relates to those who are going to the Royal Court Palace Tritons on the first night of your cruise. And just as a reminder for maybe newer cruisers, you will find out what your dining rotation is once you board the ship. So you will log into your app and then you can see the dining rotation. It may be one you've requested. Personally, I don't request a dining rotation because I either request a server and that server could be on a different dining rotation, or I leave it up to the universe in the hopes that I get the best server and serving team. And I don't want to make too many requests about where I want my table located or which order I want my restaurants to go, because like there's only so much they can accommodate. So, and I want like the best server. That's my top priority. Let's say you're going to Royal Court, Tritons, or Royal Palace the first night on one of the original 4 ships. That night has heavy duck, like everything is duck that's marked gluten-free on the menu. Your server can very easily work with you to give you something not duck, because I don't eat duck. And because historically I haven't been able to pre-order, you can't like ask for something that's not duck. And then with the fried brie, I will ask, but they usually do need that day lag time. And because the other 2 dining rotations are going to Royal Court the next day. Most of the time, if I end up in Royal Court the first day, fill in, the other restaurants with the same name, then they'll just bring it to me the second night. So I'm still getting my fried brie. And fried brie is possibly my favorite Disney Cruise Line food besides the churro waffles that are prepared fresh. So I always want to have fried brie and I just request it kindly. And then sometimes people will be like, I don't know if we can do that. And then I have to say, well, I've gotten it on, the other 3 ships and multitude of times and on the ship.
And I think you hit on 2 really important tips. One, you can order food from other restaurants throughout your sailing. So if you were at Animator's Palette, you really want the fried brie or an entree or a soup from Royal Palace or Royal Court, you can get it the same night as long as you let your server know ahead of time, which is the pro tip everyone needs because it gives you a lot of flexibility, especially if you don't love a certain menu or it's not jiving with you, or maybe you want fried brie every single night. That's the thing to get. But then the other thing too, I think, is setting yourself up for expectations and realistic ones that Disney tries to be as consistent as possible across the ships, but supplies can change and things can be different depending on what's going on in the kitchen, what supplies they have. We've been on sailings where they had European gluten-free and allergy products because we went on the sailing right after they came back from Europe. So that was the things that they had in stock. So they were products that were unfamiliar to us, things that we weren't as used to. Sometimes they switch up the bread product. So I think knowing that it's not going to necessarily be the same thing every time, they're going to try to keep it as consistent as possible, but that things can change. And so you got to kind of set yourself up with realistic expectations of, oh, it might be a different bread product, or maybe they can't do it on this sailing because they just didn't get it in the supply. I think that's really important to know too.
The other thing I would note based upon what Sarah said is getting food from different restaurants usually works. I will say that the Wish and the Treasure, at least the Wish, so I'm going to make the assumption that the Treasure is the same. They've been less flexible about things like that. And I don't know if it's the way the galley is set up, and they'll just come out and tell you, we can't do that. So just so that your expectations make sense or are met, they will let you know if they can do it, but they are serving more tables now than they were when Sarah and I first started cruising Disney Cruise Line. And I do think that that has caused maybe some limits. And the other thing I noticed on the Treasure is that a lot of the food has been pre-made and brought in from other locations. And so because of that, we might not get to change and get exactly what we want. Like sometimes I would like to have, like, there's an eggplant dish on the classic 4 ships, the original 4 ships. And sometimes if there's an eggplant somewhere else on board, they will make me an eggplant dish that I pre-order because it's not marked gluten-free anywhere, but it is listed on the menu. And sometimes I can get it and sometimes I can't. And then, as Gina said, when they get to know what you like, I had one server, I ordered something like maybe it was the eggplant dish again. And I believe this would have been in the Royal restaurants, the original 4 ships. And he said, so I ordered it. And the next day, he went to bring me my dinner and he brought me something else. And then he brought this plate over and said, they served me this and nobody should eat it. So here's what it looks like, but I don't think you want this. And I said, I do not want that. And it's just what they had to work with. And so sometimes it works out that you request something to be made gluten-free and sometimes it doesn't.
The best experience I had of that is we were at the Royal Court Fantasy. And this was, I think, 2 nights before that dining was coming up. And I had mentioned to the head server that there was a souffle on the menu. And I said, I know that the souffle is not gluten-free. I don't know if it can be gluten-free. I said, but what I also want to tell you is I have never in my life tried a souffle. I've never been able to try one. I'm not a baker. I don't know how to do this stuff, if there's any way at all. And he just said, well, we'll see what we can do. And so the last night, then we were in there and here he comes out with these like 2 souffles. And he looked at everybody else at the table and he said, no one else is allowed to take a bite. It's only for her.
That's the Grand Marnier souffle. And that one,
so good.
definitely the mileage will vary because you can pre-order it. And it's definitely been where one time it was just not great, but I loved that they made the effort. And then the other couple of other times I've had it. It's just the most amazing thing, but it's a lot of effort for them to make those. I think, Sarah, you texted me once when I was on a cruise and you were like, how did you get that?
Tried it half a dozen times to pre-order it. So again, setting expectations up and being realistic. Sometimes you can pre-order, but they just can't do it on the sailing. Oh man, one day I'm gonna get that someday.
Sarah, how should it typically look in the dining room for your evening meals?
So we'll kind of skip past the first night, which we talked a little bit about. You're going to order off that menu. Sometimes you may have limited options. But then after your first meal that first night, what they're going to typically do is ask you to pre order your meal. And I know that that might feel a little strange saying, I'm going to decide what I want to eat the next day. But if you're like us, I'm always looking at menus. I know Gina's looking at menus. We're thinking about those menus in advance. So you're going to get a menu sometime during that meal that you're having that day. And they're going to say, hey, take a look at this, decide what you want for the next day. And then we're going to pre order that. So that when you come in the next day, we already have your order. The kitchen already has that order. They're on top of it. And the food will just start coming out. So they'll give you that menu. You'll take a look. You'll decide what you want. Let your server know. Like Christy said, it used to be the head server. Now it's sort of your main server. You'll order that food. And then the next day, magic happens and food arrives. Or at least that's the goal. Magic happens and food arrives, right? The stuff you think you order should be there.
And this works for children too, because my son will get into a zone of his food where literally for a 7-night cruise, he wants to eat spaghetti every single night or pasta. He doesn't care what the noodle looks like. We actually just start pre-ordering his pasta as well so that he can for sure get it. He gets pasta. He gets a salad with an extra bowl of cucumbers and tomatoes, and the kitchen is on it. That way he gets what he wants. And sometimes it's mac and cheese for 7 nights. I swear whatever he eats the first night is what he eats for the next 7. It'll work with kids or any special order of something unique that you need. I actually also traveled with somebody that their son had an eating, what is the right word? Basically, they had texture problems with the food that they were going to eat. And so they ate a lot of hummus and peanut butter and plain crackers and cheese slices. And so our server just was able to work that out so that he could have those items so that he would eat. And I know that my brother's son also had some limitations of the food that they would eat or that he would eat when he was much younger. And they worked with Disney Cruise Line to actually order him a certain type of chicken tender or like chicken nugget that at that time was basically the only food my nephew would eat. So it's like a 2 or 3 month process, but Disney Cruise Line was able to have that so that he could eat those items. And then if you had a baby, they also will puree the baby's food. I mean, not the baby's food, but they will puree any food that they have on the ship to give to the baby. So they'll steam some vegetables and puree it, or they'll just give you like a bowl of peas if you need to for your younger eater. So they can work with you, and the same process would occur to order that food as if you had a dietary restriction.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And with the kids too, I mean, one of the things that we found having the 2 little ones is my children are used to obviously going out to restaurants. We go out to Disney all the time. We go out to Disney restaurants all the time, but they are wiggle worms. They don't want to sit there, and they don't want to sit there for long meals, and they don't want to sit down at a restaurant every single night, let alone multiple times per day to eat. They just don't. So one of the things that we ended up doing, just as you were saying, Christy, was pre-ordering a lot of that stuff. We would sit down to dinner. They would bring out the kids' food almost right away. They would eat. And then the kids were saying, can I go over to Oceaneers Club, or they call it kids? Can I go to Kids Club, Kids Club, Kids Club? And so my partner would then just walk them down, bring them there, and come back. And so now we have a nice adult only meal and everybody's happy.
Yes.
Because the kids didn't want to sit there all night. I wanted them to sit there with us, but it's not only my vacation, it's their vacation too, even though they didn't pay for it, which we'll talk about that with them later. But you know what I mean, right? So why can't they have fun too? So they went down and enjoyed a kids club. They had already gotten to eat, and that was phenomenal.
Yes, we did that for years. And actually, Gina, you're almost at the point where your son can walk your daughter to the kids club. You're basically going to be there on your next cruise if you choose. And then you don't have to walk them, or you just sort of walk out, stare up at them going where they need to go, and they can make it there. So that's a fun, once you make it to that point. I guess my son was maybe 9 when we first were like, yes, you can walk up the stairs to go to the kids club. And then, a lot of times we check behind, make sure he made it. But yeah, I agree. You want everybody to be happy. So if that means they're playing a video game, or watching something, just make sure there's no noise on that there's no sound, because people did not go on their Disney cruise to listen to a cartoon. And so somebody else's cartoon. So just please keep that in mind to try to limit the volume or make no volume. Use headphones or go volume free. You go volume free too with your kids, Gina, right?
I do. Yeah. We always have headphones, and our typical way, we're kind of in this routine if we're out and they need like a stimulation break too. They need to zone out to something. So it's not always necessarily because of the dinner, but maybe sometimes it's that there's just so much that's happened that day that they need like 30 minutes or something to themselves to just kind of do that. But yeah, we do headphones. After we order, they can have pads until food comes, and then pads come away. But while we're talking about the kids, I wanted to know, because I did not know this. And Christy, maybe you told me and I missed it, or there's a lot of stuff that happens when you're planning for these, right? But when we were at one of the adult specialty dining, so we were at Apollo for brunch one day, and the kids were down at the kids club, and my son had called and said he wanted to leave. So they sent a text, and, I went to the nearest phone, whatever, and called. And we had maybe only been in Apollo for 45 minutes. It wasn't that long, comparatively to the meal. And when I called down, they said, oh, your son wants to leave. I said, okay, well, can you tell him that we'll be there in just a little bit? We actually are eating at Apollo right now for brunch. And so I didn't want to walk out right away. And she said, oh my gosh, you're at specialty dining? I am so sorry. Ma'am, next time you drop your children off and you're at specialty dining, please let us know. And I guess they sort of have this unwritten, maybe it's written, I don't know, rule where they will allow you that time to eat without calling you, that they will try to kind of occupy your kids if they get bored or do something to keep them down there. Now, of course, if they're hurt, injured, something like that, yes, they're going to call you. They're not going to be like, whoop, nope, sorry, can't come get you. But I just thought that was something really great to know, because I've talked to a lot of people since then, and they said, oh, we had to leave because our kid wanted to get out, or we've had to do this. And they didn't, they weren't aware that you could let them know that you are up there and the kids can stay.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And I did not know that. So you told me actually when you came back from your cruise. I will say that once I told my son that we were going to Palo, and then I said, you may not call to get picked up unless you're injured. So we will pick you up. We will check on you when we are finished eating brunch, but don't ask to be picked up unless something is seriously wrong, or something is wrong, not seriously wrong, but something is wrong. And then we'll check on you after. If you want to stay after, you can, but we'll let you know that we're done with brunch. You can make that decision. Okay. But I want to circle back, Gina. Yes. You had a really unusual first day of your first cruise after you already had to change your entire cruise plan because your cruise changed because of the hurricane. And so I want to talk about what happened, because I want people to know that this isn't proper and that people should not let this happen to them.
Yes. I don't know necessarily if I would call me crying at dinner unusual per se. That is more than once. But if you know, right? But yes, I think so. I was prepared about the pre-ordering. I knew about that. And of course, it had already been a very highly anxious and just sort of
overwhelming.
Thank God. It's a great word. Yes. Overwhelming day in general. And so sitting down, what I was not prepared for, though, was to sit down and say, I have the allergy. We had that discussion. And the server brought me over the menu for that evening. And then I'm also ordering for my daughter, right? So we had my menu for that evening and my daughter's menu for that evening. And then probably within 3 minutes came over with the breakfast, lunch, and dinner menu for both of us for the entire next day, and said, I need to take all of these orders at the same time. And so I kind of went into shock a little bit. I think I just sort of sat there and stared at them and said, I don't know that I'm prepared to do all of that right now. They said, no, you have to pre-order. So pre-order all of this stuff. And I think there was, had I not already been so overwhelmed with the day, there was definitely, cultural differences there too. I don't think that came off to me. I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm being so pressured into this. And I don't at all think that that was the intent. It was just it's my first cruise and not their first cruise, right? So they're used to doing this with all the guests. And I'm going, what are you talking about? And so I had managed to get through the order for the evening. And then I did what I think was the best thing to do sometimes in these scenarios is I looked at the rest of my family and said, I'm going to need a minute. And I left the restaurant. I left the restaurant, found a nice quiet corner and just, cried for a little while. Yes. And as I'm crying in the corner, I feel so bad. So if you're one of these people listening, but there was a lovely woman who came up and she was like, are you okay? And I went, I'm fine. She said, okay, well, you don't seem very fine. I said, I know, but I really am. It's okay. So I feel bad because she must have thought that something's going on. But anyhow, so just know that had I had that to do over again, what I would have said is, this is wonderful. I am going to pre-order those. I'm not going to do it right in this moment because I need to do one thing at a time. And just to have advocated a little bit more for myself, I didn't have really any reserves left, right, to go through that. And so it ended up being okay. And we worked it out for the rest of the cruise. And I think that actually helped to set the tone between the two of us of what I need and what they need. So they could see that was too much for me. And can we do this? Especially, you're ordering for yourself and for somebody else. So you're picking out a lot of food at one time. And I didn't know that I was all the way prepared for then not only dinner the next night, but if you wanted breakfast and lunch here too, pre-order those. And so that kind of got a little messy for me.
Do you guys typically pre-order breakfast and lunch? So I know that Disney Cruise Line offers the option, but I almost never pre-order breakfast and lunch. Churro Waffle Day, which we'll talk about Churro Waffle Day before this recording is over. But do you guys pre-order breakfast and lunch?
We do about maybe 50% of the time. It really depends. And I think to Gina's point, I have noticed on our last several sailings that they're really pushing pre-ordering for breakfast and for lunch. And sometimes we like to flex. Like sometimes I'm going to breakfast by myself. Sometimes we're like, we just want chicken tenders on the cruise deck, on the pool deck. We don't want to do main dining lunch or Marceline Market or Cabanas. So sometimes we want to give ourselves flex time, which is what I try to, like Gina said, setting yourself up for success. I've sort of taken a step back with our service and said, hey, we're not really sure what we want to do tomorrow. So is it okay if we just kind of skip pre-ordering today? We may do it on some other days, but tomorrow we're just kind of seeing where things go. So we do it kind of half and half. And honestly, I don't know that it really does that much in terms of expediting the food based on my experience. I've even been they lost my pre-order on our last cruise for the churro waffles, and I nearly cried. I nearly went to a corner like Gina and had a breakdown because I was like, no, I need the churro waffles. And they were able to make them on the fly. It took a little bit more time. I think it was only like 20 minutes, which was fine with me. But I haven't noticed, especially for breakfast and lunch, a major difference. So we kind of do it half and half.
And sometimes breakfast and lunch takes 20 minutes to get your food. So whether you pre-ordered or not.
Exactly.
Gina, do you typically pre-order breakfast and lunch?
The only time that I have for breakfast, aside from the infamous Churro Waffle Day, is if there's something on there that I really want and maybe isn't necessarily marked gluten-free. So if there was a crepe one day or there was something like that where I said, can I get this? They said, yes, absolutely, if you pre-order. Outside of that, I'm likely to not do sit-down breakfast because I just sort of want to take our time and wake up whenever we want to. So I do the room service ordering and you have like a little tag, that fits on the outside of your door. And if you put it out by a certain time, you can mark down what you want. So we would do that each day and mark down just GF next to the things that I thought they would likely have gluten-free. So something like a bagel, I would put gluten-free next to it, muffins, gluten-free. There was a couple other items. We got some cream cheese, that type of thing. And we would do that each day for breakfast instead. And then it would go up to the buffet. So if there was something in Marceline Market or what was the other one? I forget.
Cabanas.
The Cabanas. I might get eggs or something like that. That seemed pretty easy enough. And then the same thing for lunch. We typically didn't want to be tied down to have to be somewhere for lunch because we didn't know what the events were that day, or if we wanted to be in the inflatable course or on the aqueduct or any of those things. And so we typically wouldn't do that for lunch. But yeah, I would say overall, just if there was something specialty, not necessarily as a standard.
Yeah, occasionally I think I've requested Eggs Benedict in advance because they have that both in the buffet and in the sit-down restaurant. But even that, I'll forget to pre-order and they can still accommodate us. I mean, they'll let me know if they can't too. Usually though, I wouldn't order Eggs Benedict at the buffet unless I saw Eggs Benedict at the buffet. So I'm not trying to like get a special item that I haven't requested in advance if it's not something they're already serving, because their hollandaise sauce is gluten-free and they have a proper gluten-free toasting station up there. They can handle it all. And actually, in terms of gluten-free in Cabanas for breakfast versus, or Marceline Market versus the sit-down restaurant, I'm pretty sure that some of the food still comes from Cabana, because I think that the toaster is in Cabanas still in the morning and that the waffle maker is in Cabanas in the morning. And so that they are bringing the food from Cabanas down to the sit-down restaurant if you are eating breakfast there, depending on the items. So I just go to Cabanas for the most part for breakfast, unless I know I'm just eating an omelet and some fruit. The fruit tastes differently when Disney cuts it up for you.
It's so true. They have the best fruit.
Like that plate with a little bit of mango or papaya. I think it's papaya. And berries.
And I don't know how they do it, because you get home and you pick up a mango and papaya and then it just goes bad and you toss it. So you're like, what was the magic? Is it just...
And how do they even cut it up? They're so difficult to cut and you can get them everywhere. Let's talk about the beautiful churro waffles.
The best thing, the thing you need. I feel like you should really talk about them, Christy, because you're the one that really has been the pro tip power user of all of things gluten-free churro waffles. Like, you're the go-to person.
Okay, so churro waffles came out during the pandemic. So, well, not during it, but right after the pandemic ended, it was on the Magic first, and the Magic got gluten-free churro waffles one day of the cruise. And since then, all of the ships have received them. And it's still typically one day of the cruise. Now, the thing with special diets is you can technically order them more days, but they are actually usually just better the day that is churro waffle day, because on most of the ships, my experience at this point is they are deep fried. And so if you order them on a different day, they're just going to shove some sugar on your waffle, which is fine. The deep fried churro waffle day is where it's at. So what I typically do is I ask my server or the head server on one of the first days of the cruise. Churro waffle day is almost never the second day of the cruise. So because they don't want to make it for people all week long because they're excited about churro waffle day. So I'll say, which day is churro waffle day? Now, typically it's either the last day of the cruise or the castaways lookout day of the cruise, but they'll know. And they'll say churro waffle day is this morning. And so I'll say, great, I am going to want that on those days. And then we sort of don't talk about it again until it's time. And then I'll pre-order it. And honestly, sometimes my server and I have forgotten to pre-order it. And like Sarah said, it wasn't an issue. But the churro waffle day, if you go, they are fried 9 times out of 10. And they are amazing. And I always get them at Cabanas because that's where they're made. And 9 times out of 10, I don't think I've had them 10 times, but maybe I have. They come out fresh and hot and just amazing. And so churro waffle day. So I roll into Cabanas. Right at the end usually is where there's a head waiter at like maybe a hostess stand or host stand. And I'll say, I have a pre-order for churro waffle. And then maybe I'll add a sausage or a hash brown. Because y'all, the hash browns are like McDonald's hash browns that we can't eat. And you can get them at Cabanas or Marceline Market on Disney Cruise Line. So get the beautiful, gorgeous hash brown. I mean, maybe not on churro waffle day. It's a lot of food. No, just eat it all. You're on vacation. They are delicious. They are amazing. Order them and love them. I have also had an occasion where I've asked when churro waffle day is. And then like a day or two later, the server will say, let's say it's a longer cruise. He'll say, oh, they're going to make you churro waffles tomorrow. So go to Marceline Market or to Cabanas. And so then you get like bonus churro waffles.
The churro waffles are gluten-free and vegan. So it's not, sometimes there's things where we talk about it's only gluten-free and they can't make them. And I know certainly if you're used to the churros at Nomad Lounge or at Three Bridges on Disney World property, those ones contain dairy. And so when you're getting the waffles, though, it is a way that you can have something that is churro-esque in a Mickey form, which things taste better in Mickey forms. We all know that. And then you can have them gluten-free and dairy-free because they're vegan.
That is a really good point.
Oh, can I do a pro tip for that, for the breakfast? Because it just occurred to me that when I was talking about ordering things to your room where you have like the bagels or the muffins or that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
We would also do that with things and then go up to the buffet. So that way I would already have all of my bread and bagels and all of that stuff already done and toasted, right? And then
smart.
And maybe I would just say, can I just have a side of lox and cream cheese or whatever it was that I wanted to put on it that day? And that made it for a very, very quick breakfast for us because we were in and out and they're not really necessarily having to prepare anything. So depending on what you have going on that day, if it's like a excursion day and you have to get off the boat really early, I mean, it worked out really well for stuff like that. So that was really helpful.
That is brilliant.
Thank you.
You know, and that works because on excursion day, I usually bring like purse food because I need food in the middle of my day. Like I cannot wait 6 hours or 5 hours to eat. So there will be many a time where I will go to a sit down or go to Cabanas and get an omelet and a bagel. But now I'm going to do this. I didn't even think about the card on the door the night before. And the card you can find in your desk, you guys. And there's no charge for room service, but you should tip the person who's delivering it $1 to $2 like an item or a person that they're serving. But I never thought to use the card to order a gluten-free bagel before. That is amazing. And then one of our listeners actually said she orders like milk. And if you're on the Wish or the Treasure, I don't know that I would do this, but orders milk via room service and orders a bunch of them like the first morning or something, and then uses that for their children the rest of the mornings and then puts them in the fridge. But the Wish and the Treasure have a beverage cooler, and I would check that before you put milk in it because sometimes it does not get that cold. Okay, so purse food. So I'm going to get this bagel and then I'm going to go to Cabanas and I'm going to request a omelet. And then I shove that in my bread and shove it in a napkin in my purse and I take it. And I have taken eggs, which probably sound gross, but on so many excursions. And then at like 11:30, and sometimes I'll do bread and cream cheese in my purse too. But like, it's not that many hours before I eat it. And I have never had a problem and I've never been sick. Your mileage may vary, but purse eggs has saved me so many times.
And I just bring a box of small plastic baggies. That way, if I'm someplace and I need to, that works for like to-go food. I'm doing air quotes. You can't see me on a podcast, but to-go food when we're at a restaurant too, there might be like maybe my daughter got gluten-free, dairy-free pizza. And we're thinking, okay, right around 10 o'clock, she's going to be saying she's hungry again. So I just take those pieces, put them in a plastic baggie and have them in our fridge. And of course, you can't eat it up in the microwave, but everybody knows cold pizza is good. And so she'll have it that way. And I'll do that again for the excursion days. This next cruise, there's actually 2 different excursions that we're going on that are full day and lunch is included, which I'm terrified of, obviously, because like what lunch is included and you can't mark on those that you have allergies or not or preferences. So I'm just going to be bringing, or maybe you can, Christy's giving me a look. But so I'm just planning on bringing a lot of things in my purse. And then at least I'll have that because I know I'll be able to eat once I get right back on the ship. So just something to ward off the hangry so that we continue having a fun family time and not the other way.
Just don't bring fruit or vegetables because you're not allowed to bring, like if it's cooked or whatever, in your eggs, but you're not allowed to bring that stuff off the ship. Like you cannot roll off with an apple in your purse. But buffets. I would say if you have an excursion that includes food, I would call Disney Cruise Line and have them note it. They can get in touch with the shore excursion team and make a notation. I have emailed Disney Cruise Line in the past as well to ask if there could be a gluten-free accommodation at the buffet so I could be prepared or not. And it takes quite a while to get a response. So I would do that early, but they'll at least let you know. In my experience, unless it's a boat that has food being offered, which I have had on multiple occasions, there is almost always a ton of food made gluten-free. So sometimes there's a language barrier. So if you were going to Mexico, I would bring a little card that talks about in Spanish that you can print off online. I think celiactravel.com has them. And usually I just donate like $5 to the guy because thank goodness they're putting every language up there that says you're gluten-free and dairy-free, I think. But so if I was going to a country that spoke another language, I would show that potentially have the slip of paper. But otherwise, you can talk to a manager. 9 times out of 10, I've had safe food. Like I've never not had safe food. It was either food I wouldn't eat or they told me and it was safe. Because the United States is the place the most where they throw gluten in the most random foods, where most other places don't do that. So there's not as much of that issue. The other thing is, even if you're on a boat, so I was in Santorini a couple of years ago, and they gave us this huge spread of food that I don't think anybody was expecting on this like sail or this catamaran boat. And then I just let them know that they were in the kitchen, like and on this boat preparing it. And maybe there was only like 20 people on this excursion. So I just let them know that I was gluten free and that I would love to eat some of this beautiful feta and stuff like that they had. And they were also serving bread. So they let me eat the food off of the buffet before everybody else came to eat and potentially get bread in the places. So like the pasta, I obviously couldn't eat, but I could ignore that and I could eat this gorgeous feta salad and then a couple of other things that I was able to just eat and discuss with them as they were preparing this delicious meal. So sometimes it's all about advocating for yourself and analyzing the situation as to whether or not you're going to get food. And I probably still had purse eggs that day that I didn't have to eat and that I could just throw away when I got back to the ship.
It's a really good point. Well, besides purse eggs, which I guess maybe wouldn't be my favorite thing, but you do you, Christy. But I will say also food allergies is another consideration. So I feel like gluten-free can be a lot easier to navigate because we have food allergies in my household, some that are more rare. It can be a little bit more difficult. So not only advocating for yourself, assessing the situation, but having pocket food with you, whether it's a protein bar or some other kind of snack, is a really good idea. We've done the translation cards in other countries too. Some countries are better about disclosing and making it clear what's in food or isn't than others. But like if we go someplace, it's a little bit more difficult for Brandon to get a meal because 9 times out of 10, the options are going to be a chicken or a fish dish, right? And he can't have either of those. So we might be able to do a vegetarian or vegan option, but then that brings in some of his other allergies. So yeah, definitely know you and your family, but be prepared when you're doing an excursion because you don't want to have the nasty reality of like, oh, we don't have food and everybody's hangry. Like Gina said, we're hangry, we're not having a good day. Make sure you have those things set up before you go out to those excursions.
And you could bring food onto Disney Cruise Line. You cannot refrigerate the food. So it needs to be like in a commercial refrigerator. So it has to be shelf stable food and it has to be sealed. So there have definitely been times where people have rolled in with like cereal for their toddlers in an open bag or whatever. And they were like, you can't bring this on. And then once we boarded and someone had like a homemade cake that they were bringing on to like serve for somebody's birthday, which was fantastic, but not allowed. So it would have to be like, I don't know why this is what popped in my head, which is clearly not gluten-free. But like if you needed something like that, it has to be in a commercial box sealed up. So you can bring granola bars or your own cereal or things like that you know are safe. And you could put those in your pocket as well.
I love that. And then I also, on the psychological aspect of it, I try and keep in mind when things like that happen because, you know, problems come up and things go awry. But when I'm on like an excursion, just anywhere and there's food served, and I'm not able to eat anything and I have to eat my pocket food, in my mind, I'm reminding myself, I didn't book the excursion for the food that I didn't know was going to be here. I booked it for this experience. I booked it to be with my family. And this was not going to be, no matter what, this was not going to be the most amazing meal that I've had all week or all weekend or however long my cruise is. So just kind of putting things in that context to me then too makes me feel like I'm not missing out on something. I've gotten all that I wanted to out of it. And you know what? I had a little meal replacement bar and I got on the ship and treated myself to ice cream or whatever it was, right?
Do you guys eat the ice cream off of the pool deck? I know on the Wish and the Treasure, they have gluten-free cones. I've done it maybe once or twice. I'm just always so like concerned about a crummy from a cone getting in. But do you guys do it?
It's too much dairy for me, so I skip it. I do have dairy in my diet, but ice cream is a no-fly zone. So sometimes what we'll do is go to Cabanas or Merceline Market and ask a head server if we can get one of those cones, but then get dairy-free ice cream. You can get the dairy-free ice cream over there. You used to be able to get it over at the ice cream spot, but now they they want you to get it over at Cabanas or Marceline Market. So if you're gluten-free and dairy-free, you can get it over there. And then sometimes they'll give you the whole like little thing of the ice cream too. I've had that before. Room service, you can get non-dairy ice cream there. So we kind of look for different places. And then it just reduces the stress for me of like a potential cross-contact issue or something like that.
That is brilliant. See, this is why we have to do these shows and collaborate, because I never thought to request a cone. And they have, for ice cream eaters, they have hard, like regular ice cream at Cabanas or Marceline Market on certain days. It's not every day, I don't think. They probably have it somewhere in there. But you can then request a safe allergy scoop of ice cream.
And then what is it on the Wish? Like on the Fantasy, I remember that you could do your own, like people get their own cones and they're, responsible for their own swirl. And then on the Wish, that wasn't the case. You had to have somebody else do it. But one of the tips that I've seen other people do is they get, like when they're on Castaway, I'm not sure about Lighthouse Point though, I imagine, but they have ice cream there and they have the swirl machines and all of that. And so they've asked for gluten-free cones to take on the island with them. And so they can have them because they don't have gluten-free cones on the island. But while you're there, when you order ahead of time for your lunch that you're going to have, they do have the gluten-free, dairy-free ice cream. So you can also get that while you're there, plus your gluten-free cone, or just make your magic happen.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I think we covered so much. Is there anything else that you ladies can think of that we missed relating to eating with a special diet on Disney Cruise Line? The key is to advocate for yourself and to potentially do some research. Like I know on my Instagram account, as one of my pinned posts, I actually have gluten-free food that I have eaten on Disney Cruise Line, and it goes through some different pictures, and it'll just give people ideas of what options exist. And I will make one it'll take me forever to do it, but I'll make one for the Treasure Wish as well once I've done my next Treasure Cruise, because the food offered is completely different than the food, besides churro waffles, than the food offered on the original 4 ships. So, and Gina's really good about reels and things like that of the just different food options. So once she takes her cruise in February on the Treasure, that would be good to follow as well. But is there anything else you can think of that we haven't covered?
I would say I had 2 quick things that I was thinking. The first one was the specialty places that you have to pay for the food, like in the bars and those kinds of things. We have not been very successful there of getting anything gluten-free. And they've just said, it's a different kitchen, smaller place, whatever, we can't do that. So just kind of know that, because some of the things feel like, oh, well, chicken wings, why can't you do that? Hey, you know what? I'm not going to question it, because I'll just get them later somewhere else. So it's not a big deal.
I at the Periscope pub, the Treasure, so the new pub, there are 2 items on the menu that could be made gluten-free. I feel like one of them was shepherd's pie. It was not tater tots, which is what I really hoped, because they had a loaded tots. And there was something else. I'll confirm what that second item is when I go back on. But there are definitely 2 items, at least as of December, that could be served at Periscope. But that's a really good point. Like you're not rolling into whatever that pub is called on the other ships and ordering off of that menu.
Yeah. Yes. And then the other thing that I've started, some may call this obsessive. I don't know. You put your own label on it. I'm okay with it. I won't be offended. That I've been starting to do is whenever I get the menus, because they're posted somewhere. So Christy has all the Wish menus posted on her site. The Treasure menus, I'm sure, will be coming, but then you can also see a lot of, like Sarah and I both, when we do our reels and posts, from the Fantasy and those, we'll post a lot of the menus. So whenever I can get those ahead of time, what I like to do is I come up with my list, because look, I know sometimes it's like, I don't know what I want to eat tomorrow for dinner, but also, yes, you do. Because you look at the menu and go, oh, I'm sorry, gluten-free ravioli. Haven't had that in 3.5 years. So let me go ahead and order that tomorrow, right? Yeah.
Wait, where can you get gluten-free ravioli?
1923.
That mushroom one. That's why I haven't ordered it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, lobster salad there too. That's absolutely amazing. Yeah. So what I will do is I actually went, when we went on the Wish, because it was only 3 nights, and I thought, well, this is a short cruise and I don't want to spend a lot of time trying to come up with the meals and make that. So I downloaded all the menus from Christy's site. And then I went through and made a list of what I wanted to eat every single night of that cruise. So when they came to me the first night, mistakes won't happen to me again, right? When they came to me the first night and said, we need you to pre-order, I said, oh, I can pre-order every single night if you'd like. Here's my Rolodex of what I would want to eat. And that for me took a lot of the anxiety out of it because I felt like an air quote, normal person when I'm going out to dine. I just sat down at the table with everybody else. All of my food was already pre-scripted for me. I didn't have to worry about any of that. And all of my attention could be focused on getting my children off the floor or telling them not to drop their napkin or no, you can't turn that cup upside down because there's still lemonade in it. So those types of things, right? Where I didn't have to then be sidetracked by what I want to eat. So that's my other really big tip.
No, it's a good tip. And it's so Gina. It is hilarious.
Lovingly.
Oh, yes, of course. Anything else, Sarah, that you can think of?
We didn't really talk a lot about adult dining, but if you do adult dining, it is going to work differently than it will with your main dining. You're not pre-ordering. They don't have an allergy menu on any of the ships for those, but fear not, they can do so many things. If you go to Apollo or Apollo Steakhouse, you want the gluten-free souffle all day, every day. You always want that souffle, but they can do really great stuff. They can do gluten-free pizzas, gluten-free pastas, things like that. And even Remy, which is more their fine dining Michelin star kind of equivalent restaurant. We've had really good experiences and they've been able to even accommodate Brandon's allergies with no issues, which is really nice. No additional things that we've had to do.
Do you let them know for Remy ahead of time about Brandon's dietary restrictions so they can have meals prepared?
We do. And I'll tell a really quick, funny story from our lab. I don't know if it's funny or horrible. We ended up not going because of of all the rockiness. We had really bad waves, so everybody on the ship was really seasick. We weren't able to do our Remy, but Remy did call us on our last sailing, which was just a couple of months ago, and we're like, we need to know all the allergies. And I was like, we were just about to call you all, but they really wanted to make sure that they had Brandon's allergies. And then they also told us in advance, they were like, you need to set your expectations low. And I was like, I don't know what that means. We've been to Remy 3 or 4 times before this. So it was a little bit of a weird vibe. We don't know how it would have turned out because we didn't end up going there, but definitely make sure to let them know. We've never had an issue though. And like I said, Brandon has a lot of allergies and it's been fine.
And I'm not paying $150 for my fine dining experience to let my expectations be lowered. I don't think so. Figure it out, Disney. Figure it out.
Yeah. And also, as I said, I'm like, if you are a Michelin star restaurant, you shouldn't be using chicken as a filler in all of your sauces and stocks.
I'm going to Enchanté for the first time on the Treasure with a friend for lunch. I am definitely going to let them know that as a choice, I don't eat seafood and that I am gluten-free so that hopefully I can have some items that did not breathe underwater and also are gluten-free for me. I'll let them give me mushrooms and I will eat it. But as a choice, I would choose not to. Yeah.
Good.
So, and I think the Enchanté lunch is the same as dinner. Pretty sure now that the menu is the same. So I'll be able to circle back after my cruise and report back. Palo Prima Notte. So the first night at Palo, they have like a 4-course is the wrong word, but it's a pairing and a bite. So it's a wine with a bite of food. And they were able to accommodate me without issue, gluten-free. I would definitely still check with them, but I let them know in advance that I would be joining them for Prima Notte. And it's like you can sit down and have Palo the first night of the cruise, but there's also something different. It's a paid experience. It's opposite of your dining time. And it's like limited to maybe 20 people or 30 people, however many they're choosing to do. And with tax and tip, it's like $100 a person, but it is amazing. The best bites of food. And for me, I was able to avoid the seafood course as well and eat something different during that course. So I was able to have a gluten-free gnocchi, which was so good as whatever the course was that they served that. And then I was able to avoid seafood. So your mileage may vary a little. And I would just ask, because if you can't eat half the food, it's not, in my opinion, worth going. Or at least decide in advance what makes sense for you and your party.
We hit all the big ones. We have room service, specialty dining,
breakfast, lunch, dinner,
service, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, pool deck, castaway,
meltdowns.
My goodness.
So I think I think we're at the point of the show then where we asked where we could find you on the internet.
Oh gosh, where can't you find us anymore? We're all over the place, Christy. So I'm at Gluten Free Disney World on Instagram and YouTube is at Gluten Free Disney World. I also cover Universal Studios. That would be Gluten Free Universal. My website is glutenfreewdw.com. And on there, I create guides for every single festival that comes up for Epcot. So all the different food festivals, and I'll mark what's gluten-free, dairy-free, vegan, what can be modified. And that's after meeting with chefs and verifying those things. So it's not just my own personal opinion. And then I also have a guide that you can purchase and download that covers every single eatery in all 4 of the Disney parks.
Yes, if you're a client of mine, reach out too, because I have a discount code for the main guide for Walt Disney World. So if you are my Disney client and need the gluten-free guide or the allergy guide, then I can give you a little discount. Those guides of Gina's are amazing. And so literally they cover everything. The festival guides are very inexpensive and they are 100% worth it because it's literally going to just make your life easier with what you can eat. And when you're like me, I don't know. I've never showed up at a festival ready to eat, sort of not starving. I am not as prepared as Gina, and I forget that I have to prepare. And so then I can just quickly look and I'm like, what can I eat? Because now I'm starving.
Yeah.
So,
and then you still ask at those, but then also the bigger guide too. We did a lot of work on including things from, I have a celiac dietitian that's in there talking about safe drinks that you can have. So alcohol is covered in there. How to mobile order, what if you're staying club level, how to order at table service, can you send special requests to special diets that you can get that when you're dining out. So it really covers just about everything that I, as you now know, the anxious traveler would want to know. And I'm assuming you would want to as well.
it's so good. And Sarah, where can we find you on the internet?
Well, you can find me at gluten-free and dairy-free www.com. We also have gluten-free and dairy-free Disney at Instagram, YouTube, all the places. We do lots of YouTube videos where we highlight our trips. So if you are really into cruise vlogs and you want to see what somebody eats in a day or how they experience DCL, we do those, as well as Disney World dining reviews. Our website has lots of written reviews. So videos are not your jam, you can see written reviews. And we also co-locate all of the allergy menus, so you don't have to weed through the ones that are on Disney's website. But yeah, it takes a village. It's, hearing Gina talk, we use her guides all the time for festivals, even as locals. And even the tips that Christy has and our friend Alexis and so many other people, it warms my heart, hearing all of the different things that we share with each other, because I'm like, I didn't know this, or this tool is so handy. So I think definitely reach out to all of us, see the different things that we have, because we all have a lot of great info. And yeah, we want to help set you up for success too when you go on your trips.
And I will rarely travel anywhere or eat anywhere if I have not already scoured YouTube looking for Sarah's videos to see what their experience was like before I get there. So I will say that her YouTube videos are absolutely invaluable for when you're planning things. They're wonderful.
So great. You guys are such planners. I love it. If you need help planning your own trip, even though I might not always as carefully plan my own, you can reach out to me, Christy, at packyourpixiedust.com. And I am all over the internet at Pack Your Pixie Dust as well. So if you are not working with a travel planner, I would love to help you plan your next allergy-friendly travel experience. So ladies, thank you so much for joining me today. Of course, this went forever long, but this is also, we go to dinner and we're there for 5 hours. So I guess that's par for course.
There's so much to say. And thank you very much. This was fun.
Yeah, this was a blast. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. That'll do it for this episode. We'll see you next time on the DCL podcast. Bye, everyone.
Well, that's going to wrap up the show. Once again, we want to thank Gina and Sarah for coming on and help sharing how they navigate food allergies and food restrictions on Disney Cruise Line. If you're enjoying the show, we greatly appreciate you leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We would also like to thank our Patreons who help make this show happen each and every week for us. You too can help support the show by visiting us at patreon.com/DCL Podcast. Whether you're boarding a cruise, enjoying a trip to the parks, or venturing outside of Disney, on behalf of myself, Christy, and Steve, we want to wish you smooth sailing and safe travels. And we'll see you next time on the DCL Podcast.
The DCL Podcast is not affiliated with the Disney Cruise Line, Walt Disney Company, Adventures by Disney, or Run Disney. All of the opinions expressed on our shows are those of the hosts and the guests who appear on the show. If you have any questions about any of these products, please contact the Walt Disney Company.